he actually said to me, James, I'm thinking about leaving. And 2 weeks later, he turned in his notice. And then I got a text 7 years later from him, and he said, I just want to thank you for firing me and giving me that kick. He used the phrase kick in the ass. I needed that at that time.
James, thank you so much for coming on today. I think you and I spoke a couple weeks ago. I forget even who introduced us, but like your energy as we were having that discovery call, I was like, this is going to be a really fun 45-minute, 60-minute conversation. So first, thank you so much for coming on today. What I wanted to start with was you were at an event this week. So my partner was also at an event, Alana Burr, and she was there, and she said that you told this incredible story of right person, right seat. And typically we like start from the beginning, like what's your background? How did you grow up? Things like that. But I actually wanted to start there today because she said it was a pretty powerful story. And I think that's it's a great nugget for people that are out there. So talk to us about right person, right seat.
Sure. It's not like a pure right person, right seat. It's more about what we call the 3 strike rule. I told a story about the first time I did right people, right seats, and there was a nugget embedded in there from an experience I had earlier in life that I brought to the 3 strikes rule. So the way the 3 strikes rule exists within EOS is when you reach a point with an employee that it's time to manage them out of the organization, coach them out of the organization. Things are not going well, and you need a framework to do that. I'll discuss what the 3 strikes framework looks like first, then I'll tell you about how I applied it. The 3 strikes framework is you sit down with your employee on the first strike. You say, "Hey, here's my expectations. I want to have clarity on the expectations that I have for you in your role. Those expectations are going to be cultural in nature and they're going to be performance in nature. So, right person. So, do they meet the core values? If they're not matching the core values, you're talking about that. And right seat. If they don't GWC their seat, they don't get it, they don't want it, they don't have the capacity, you're talking about that too. Ideally, you're using the EOS People Analyzer to guide that conversation and give it a little bit of a framework. Okay. Then the second strike, you say, hey, okay, we're all in agreement, hopefully, at the end of this first strike meeting about what's going to happen between now and the second strike, which is about 30 days later. Okay. And you're paying close attention to what's going to happen in the meantime. You're gathering information, you're talking to your employees, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second strike meeting, either things are going amazingly well, you got them back on track. It doesn't happen that often, let's just be honest. Or things are not going so well, and you're articulating for them, hey, we've had a few other situations show up, or yeah, things are great, that's fine, you can detach. And then you're saying, okay, well, at the end of this third strike, 30 days from now, you set the meeting time and everything, we're going to not be working together anymore. So there's awareness there. Now, what we know from EOS, because we've done this thousands of times with our clients, is that 90% of the time when the employee gets to that first strike meeting, is that they know they're not a fit, they know their job is in jeopardy, and they immediately start looking for another job. And they'll generally manage themselves out before you get to the third meeting. That's one of the reasons why the 3 strike rule is good. You're basically declaring, hey, this is what we expect. The employee in their mind might be saying, I don't want to do that. I'm not up for it. So I need to go. Right. And that's okay. That's healthy. Right. We want people to be in their right seat, and it may not be in your organization. Now, the story I told was that the first time I did the 3 strike rule, I had a guy, I was leading an agency at the time. This is years ago. I had a web developer on my team. Great guy, but man, sarcastic, toxic, the eye rolls in the meetings, talking smack behind my back and behind other employees' backs all the time. He's just a toxic force. And what we look at, how we talk about that in EOS, is he was the wrong person. He didn't match the culture. Right, because we had a one team, one dream culture in my agency. He absolutely did not fit that. He was like just not a fit. He was poisoning the team. It was making me crazy. And I talked to him about it a bunch of times and like hadn't really made any progress. I said, okay, it's time to do the 3 strike rule. So I sat him down. I said, it's time for us to clarify expectations for each other. And I went through the expectations, right, really clearly. This is where you need to be. This is what I need to see, et cetera, et cetera. And then I did something that is the nugget. Okay, which is I sent him home. So I had the conversation with him at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And toward the end of the conversation, I said, okay, is everything that we've discussed clear? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, now I'd like you to go home. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, I'd like you to just go home. Your job is going to be here tomorrow. Your desk is going to be here tomorrow. You're not getting fired, but I want you to go home and I want you to decide if you want to be here. Like, I sincerely want you to assess yourself and your situation. Say, do I really want to be here working with James or working with this team? Because it's okay if you don't. Like, I understand that you might not want to. And the signals I've seen in the past, they kind of show me that maybe you don't want to be here, but I want you to go home, just take your stuff and go. And tomorrow morning we'll have a brief conversation about it. And we did. He went home. He really didn't want to go home because he assumed he was getting fired, but he wasn't. And he came back in the next morning. He said, yeah, I do want to stay. And I said, okay. And I saw some improvement until the second meeting. I didn't see enough improvement. I didn't see real substantive, excuse me, change. And so by the second strike meeting, he actually said to me, James, I'm thinking about leaving. And I said, great. That's good for you. That's good for me. Guess what? I will give you all the support that you need. I will write a recommendation. I will give a recommendation. I will provide my network to you. I will do anything that you need to do, that you need from me in order to be successful in your future role. Because I know you can be successful. I know you have it in you, but you're not the right fit for my team. Okay. And then he went off, and 2 weeks later, he turned in his notice. So he was gone before the third strike meeting. And he went and he left. He left the area. He didn't live where we were anymore. He moved to a totally different metro. He got married. He had kids. He took a role that was a fantastic step up for him, and he made. I would imagine, knowing what I know, he probably made at least two or three times what he was making with my team. And I sort of forgot about him. And then I got a text 7 years later from him, and he said, "I just want to thank you for firing me and giving me that kick." He used the phrase "kick in the ass." I needed that at that time, and I knew that for me felt amazing, frankly, because when you fire somebody, it sucks, right? And when you put somebody through that process, it's really uncomfortable and it's painful, right? I think the way a lot of bosses feel about that is you're taking something away from somebody. But when that happened to me, I had this realization that I had actually given him something, which is the freedom and the push to live the life that he actually wanted to live. And that felt really good. And so when I look at these types of situations, and they've happened a bunch of times in my career, I've been managing people for 25 years. I no longer think about it so much as I'm stealing their job away from them, or I'm making them destitute, because that's not often the case. The reality is, if they're not fulfilling the responsibilities of the job and they don't fit the culture, they'll be happier somewhere else. And I'm helping them along.
I love that. And how you kind of alluded to this earlier when you were like, let's be honest, usually we never get to the number three. And because that was going to be one of my follow-up questions here is like, how many times have you either like directly or indirectly been a part of either the three strike rule, or people know that there's not a fit, and like this individual magically changes and turns everything around? Like, does that happen, or more often than not, the gut feel and getting through the three strikes, like we know the path it's going down?
I think like I said, I've been a direct manager to probably in the order of about 250 people over the span of my career. And I've had conflict. Let's just give that a broad term, right? I've had conflict with probably about 10. Obviously, he was one of them. And I have never seen somebody that has fully recovered and changed. And I do think it's sort of an open secret, particularly in the recruiting industry. I have worked a great deal with the recruiting industry. I've worked with a number of different firms over the years. It's sort of an open secret that once that happens, and the what a lot of organizations call performance plan, right? Once that performance plan is in place, um, it's very rare to actually see full recovery, and that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, right? Because if the employer, the boss, is unhappy with the performance of the employee, and puts them on a performance plan. There's something in the dynamic between the boss and the employee. And I'm not saying it's always the employee's fault. In many cases, it's the boss's fault. That can absolutely happen and does happen a lot. I would like to think it didn't happen with me, but it probably did. Um, and that dynamic is broken. There's something broken about that. And it's almost like breaking up with somebody and then saying, well, let's get back together and see if it'll work. Let's break up again. Let's get back together and see if it'll work. And I personally haven't seen like a full recovery. I've seen people get into situations, I've seen the turkey trot. I've seen my peers do the turkey trot many, many, many times. I am ashamed to say that once upon a time in corporate America, I had an employee that was unfireable because she happened to be one of the first people that the employee that the company brought on. And if you were one of those first 10 people, basically they would not fire you under any circumstances. So it was common practice there to turkey trot them into another department and hope they would find another seat that they would fit. But I knew that probably wasn't going to happen. So no, I honestly, I haven't seen it happen. And I don't, from my experience, I don't think it happens very much.
And when you talk about, because you talked a little bit about the performance improvement plan, a PIP, I think is like the standard kind of industry acronym. When you think about a PIP and you think about the three strike rule, you talked about like during the first meeting, you sit down and it's outlining expectations, and so really digging deep into the things that are going wrong and the things that you need to see changed. Is there a PIP that comes along with this, or is this first meeting just a conversation to like send the signal?
No, I mean, I think the PIP, the three strike rule is a simplified PIP, right? So you have to document. Yeah, you have to. I mean, like before the first strike even happens, and I advise all my clients this, there has to be documentation, right? You have to be gathering information from employees, taking notes, gathering emails, and like you have to be forming that information up. And I am not an HR lawyer, so I'm not going to sit here and say that I am the end all and the be all on how to terminate employees, but it is effectively a PIP, right? You need to gather that information. And the guidance within EOS is you need to go into that first strike rule with three really clear examples where we've had problems, right? You can't go in with one because one can be a one-off. You can't go in with two because, well, I had a bad day, I wasn't feeling great. You got to go in with three to be able to establish a really clear pattern of unacceptable behavior in the role. And in order to have that, you need to have documented it. You need to be, as a boss, you need to be super clear on it. We also recommend that they take a clarity break before they go into that conversation, be really collected, calm, keep it professional. Obviously, this is not an opportunity to get into an argument with somebody and vent your frustrations with them. This is an opportunity to say, hey, listen, here's the situation. I've got expectations. Those expectations have to be met if you want to stay. That's really the underlying goal of it. And here's three situations in the past where you haven't met those expectations. So we need to get back on track.
I love the fact that you just said like the three examples, because when I think about core values in the organization, there's the words, and so you've got whatever kind of the highlight is, just a couple words, and you've got the description. Then you've got these things called the vignettes, and an actual tangible example of where that core value was demonstrated as an action or decision within the enterprise. And like all too often, I think we're just like, oh well, you didn't meet this level, or you didn't do this, but that doesn't tell the person that much. Like being able to point to an actual example and an action or decision that was made that was misaligned from the core values or behaviors or whatever expectation. I absolutely, I love that, because that sets a crystal clear picture.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean like the example I gave, the web developer, like I could demonstrate where like where it was there was an attitudinal problem, like a cultural problem, but there was actually a performance problem where he was letting down other people on the team, not just with how he was acting in meetings and that type of thing and his general vibe. That wasn't it. It was also that he was delivering work late, and that was causing downstream issues in our production process. And that was causing a lot of pain for people at the account management level that were dealing with clients. Like, well, we weren't able to actually do what we said we were going to do because he was dragging his feet on some of this stuff. And so there were very clear, very specific examples, but there's also sort of this cultural side too. But yeah, I mean, I talked about that with him as well because of the one team, one dream thing. Like, sitting in meetings and doing the heavy sigh when we were talking about something, that's not culturally appropriate in any situation, right? Like the eye roll so heavy that you can almost hear it. That's not appropriate, right? You're sending a nonverbal message to everybody in this room, whether you like it or not, and it's not acceptable here. So yeah, you have to have those types of examples.
How do you balance as you're going through these things? So one of the themes in the five dysfunctions of a team is like when you see a behavior, like you have to address it on the spot. And if it's in the middle of a meeting, or if there's other people in there, then you wait till immediately after the meeting, you pull them to the side and you say that whatever you just did there was unacceptable and misaligned. Like, how do you balance? Is there a certain threshold where you're like, okay, well now they've exceeded like this certain threshold, everybody knows, and so I need to pull this person aside, versus just some of these little things that you're starting to see that are adding up to, hey, we need to have a conversation because we've had too many of these smaller things that it's just not a fit right now.
Me, I've always been a big fan of, what's going on with that, right? So in these situations, hey, you delivered these pages late. What happened there, right? And literally going into it with more of an attitude of curiosity than an attitude of like you screwed up and I'm attacking you. I honestly don't want to be in those types of conversations, even though I am generally irritated. I try to go into like, hey, you know what? What was the deal with the big side during the meeting? Is something I said a problem? And just shutting my mouth and saying and listening to what they have to say. But what's happening there is you're starting a conversation off on the right foot where it's not an attack. It is very much like, hey, I'm curious. But you're also making it clear, literally in one sentence, that something happened that that there's dissonance there. Right. Or the conversation wouldn't be happening. Right. Something unusual has happened. Therefore, I want to know why it happened. So I'm asking why it happened and let's explore it and talk about it. Right. Oh, well, what you were saying about the goals for next month, I don't think that's going to be possible because, you're starting the conversation in a way that I think is actually hopefully productive. But yeah, I totally agree with the hitting it as soon as possible, even if it's just like, hey, listen, I want to talk to you about this last meeting. But I can't do it right now. I got to run to another meeting. I'm going to talk to you about it in the next 24 hours. Like even just putting a pin in it briefly so that you can come back to it, that's fine. But you're still marking it mentally in their head and your own head to circle back and make sure you deal with it. I generally don't get I avoid getting to a point where I'm sort of like an issue hoarder where like, oh, Bob did this and Bob did that. And I'm not talking to Bob. I'm hoarding emails. I'm collecting information. Um, I don't want to be in that situation because you're really setting Bob up for failure. And frankly, that's a little bit of a terrible thing to do to another human being, which is like, well, I'm not going to actually tell you what you're doing wrong until I'm ready to fire you. Right. I think that everybody deserves to be communicated with and at least for it to be explored because, hey, Bob, and that's not his real name, hey, Bob could have delivered something late for a good reason. He might have gotten his deliverables late because somebody upstream screwed something up or the client had too many questions, whatever that looks like. So I want to give them a fair shake.
Like as you're going through some of these examples, like I've screwed this up so many times. Your 10 for 200 is incredible because mine would probably be maybe 50 to 75 over 200. And whether it was we just had to hire fast and get people through the door because we were growing so fast, or we just felt we were rushed. We did not have the best batting average. Like I always used to think about Jack Welch had this great quote, and he was like, at the pinnacle of my career, right, in the mat, turning around, doing all these amazing things at GE, I got hiring right 50% of the time. I was like, holy crap, 50% coin flip. And like as you talk through these stories, it's I have not done it right. Like you said about like hoarding the issues and like humans deserve better than that. I think at times I did bottle things up, and then it just got to a place of where there was no other option. Like there were no three strikes. They had already hit their three strikes months and months ago, and so it was right into a different action. And I can't tell if it was like my fear of sabotage might be a strong word, but I always have this weird thing of like, if someone's not performing and I tell them that they're not performing, like they're going to do harm inside of the organization at that point. How have you reconciled that of like, okay, this person isn't going to log into the bank account and transfer $1 million or go and shut down our website or those things? Like, how do you reconcile they deserve it, we deserve it, and they're not going to do anything that's crazy?
This is a okay, that is a great question. I think being genuinely curious, like I said, I hate to say it, but like I think that when you ignite personalities and personal conflict in a way that is destructive, there's going to be there's going to be a blast radius, right? So when you hoard this is, and I'm speaking really for me, but I think a lot of bosses and a lot of owners and leaders go through this. Like when you're hoarding these issues and you're hoarding these issues, you're just bottling them up, and eventually it's going to explode, right? That's nitroglycerin that's just going to blow up at some point whenever you have that conversation. Well, you screwed this up, and 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 I'm pissed because you are hurting me, you're hurting my business, right? And if you're going through and instead being really responsive at the time and asking the questions, and you're not getting the answers that you want, right? Instead of waiting 2 weeks and dealing with 6 issues that are bottled up, you've got 6 issues over 2 weeks that you're dealing with incrementally over time. By the end of that 6 weeks, that employee is going to know that they've either got to get straight or they're going to have a problem because you keep asking these questions, you keep probing and asking, probing and asking, and it's not an emotional attack, right? You're not saying to them you're screwing up. You're saying what's going on. Like this isn't consistent with what our expectations are. So you're dripping it out there, and my personal experience, and trust me, I've screwed this up so many times myself, so I'm totally empathetic to that. And I've done some amazingly bad hires. I could still think of people's faces that I'm like, even to this day, I'm like, what the heck did I do? What was I thinking? That's a whole nother ball of wax. But I think that by spreading this out, you're taking. I think it allows you to be professional and non-emotional and curious about what's really going on, and you don't have that risk. I mean, yeah, like I once had an employee. This is when I was in corporate. I once had an employee, there was conflict, I had to let him go. And the guy immediately, and I mean like as soon as I sent him to clear out his desk, went back to his desk and started downloading, right? And I knew that because of this particular organization, they had software, and literally that software summoned security. I wasn't even part of the conversation. Like they were like walking past my office and ushering him out of the building. And I literally got a phone call as they were walking by, like, "Hey, just so you know, such and such is downloading. I know we know you've terminated him, so we're going to be ushering him out of the building because he's clearly trying to take your IP or take our IP." So that happens, right? Um, and I think part of the answer is here is having the right security and right processes in place so that when those conversations are happening, um, you know when to pull the plug and pull the trigger and shut down, right? Like whatever those 5 steps are that you and your HR personnel, or you and your data, you and your IT personnel need to have to pull the trigger to get somebody blocked out right away and protect your data and protect your systems and your services, do it, right? And that's what management's all about, right? Is knowing that threshold where you're like you walk out of it and you're like that dude is going to blow something up and he's going to, and just going and taking it as a manager and saying, you know what, we gotta get him out right now, right? So that's it's that is that's an art, not a science.
We're just going to stay on the people theme now because I this is brilliant insight. I already got a whole page. What's as all right? So let's think about all the things that have gone wrong. And we've talked about pips and the 3 strike rule, and now we are coaching people out of the organization or they're self-selecting. Something's going on there. From those lessons and from all those things that you've done over the years and that you still do as you help your clients through these, how has that changed your perspective on before that person ever gets in the door? And I know you talked about your background in recruiting. That happens to be something that I'm passionate about as well. Like, what are these things now? Now that you've experienced this and you've seen these things, like what types of things are you doing on the front end before they ever get through the door?
Yeah, I am a much more disciplined, and I advise my clients to be extraordinarily disciplined in terms of their recruiting processes and particularly their interviewing processes, right? And like Mark O'Donnell, the visionary for EOS Worldwide, said at a conference I was at recently, he said, don't smoke the hopium, which is like where there's this for a lot of managers and a lot of leaders, there's tremendous pressure to get a human being in the seat, right? And I have suffered from that too many, 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 many times where it's like, oh my gosh, I just need somebody to do this job. And I've got 1,000 resumes, and there's all this pressure on you to get it done. And what happens? That pressure manifests itself as fast, poor interviews. You're not really paying attention. You're just hoping somebody can fog a mirror and do the job, right? And that's when you're smoking the hopium, right? You're hoping that this person's going to work out. As I've gotten more experience, I've realized that there is nothing, absolutely no better investment in your time than thorough interviewing process, right? And really getting to know somebody, really listening to somebody, really being present in an interview, the the body language, the signaling, what words they actually use, how they use them. If they're talking about things in like a vague, squishy way, or if they're talking about things in a very concrete way, and you know this, right? Like it really happened to them, or maybe it happened to somebody, or they heard a story and they've decided to pick it up on their own, right? There's a big difference there. You can see that. And frankly, if they look animated and they look genuinely interested in the role and in getting to know you, that is something I look for, right? But like having a structured blueprint, and I got to tell you, like I love the blueprint that you guys have done. I did not come here planning to plug that, but I literally just sent it to a client because that interview structure with the screening interview and then the skills interview and then the core culture interview and the blueprint that you guys have put together is fantastic, right? Is one of the most structured things I think I've seen in my entire career. It's, I think, what, a total 5 pages. And I think anybody can take that, shape it to their own candidate, and come out with a far, far, far more disciplined and structured interviewing process than they probably have going into it. So I believe that that is time really, really well spent, is time really focusing on getting good people in those interviews. And I think the structure you've put forward and that I just described is really smart.
Thank you. I wasn't we weren't fishing for plugs there, but I absolutely appreciate it. In the Navy, we used to always talk about like our instructions are written in blood, and so when as there's different things coming out for like the helicopters and procedures and things like that, it's typically something happened to warrant those. Um, and like we've kind of translated that into hiring. Like I've made over the last 15, 20 years, like I've made poor hiring decisions, and the reason, to your point, was that there wasn't a systematic process in place. If you're asking random questions to different candidates as they're coming through the door, you have no baseline to compare any of them. And so how do you know who is better, who is more qualified if you're asking everyone different questions? Um, and then even at Hunt to Killer, like I think one of our biggest trip ups was we adopted a formula from another book, and it was great, and it put everybody through a process. But we were still getting hiring wrong, I would say, more than 50% of the time, and it's because this notion of like not looking at the person as a human, like just understanding what's their background, what's their performance, what have they done, what have they accomplished. Great, they're going to be perfect in this role. You bring them through the door, the organization rejects them like a bad organ, and you're like, what went wrong? And it's like, because you didn't know who they were as a human being. So anyhow, long-winded there, appreciated. And that's it's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, like I have evolved a great deal in how I interview people, and it is absolutely the most important part of the process because the pain of having somebody come in and then, like you said, rejected like an organ is 10 times that of actually having to reject them during the interview process and move on to somebody else. Yes, it's going to take you longer. Yes, we all know you have that pressure on your back, but the pressure that you have when they're not performing is just horrendous, and it will take a long time before if you go through the three strike rule, you're talking about at least 60 days to get somebody out the door, and you don't want to go through that, right? Invest that time up front.
Yeah, we did. It's interesting you talk about that because like it's the investment of time. And the big thing with hiring, like generally speaking, no one is ever hiring for a position that they're not already doing or a task that's not already somewhere in the organization. And so generally with a growing operation, what happens is you have a manager or an executive or anybody, and they have taken on more than they can handle. And now the business has said, we need to hire someone to take some of this stuff off their plate so we can dice or bifurcate whatever it is that is. So the fact
Delegate.
that delegate.
Yeah.
And so the fact that individual is already doing double the work and they're hiring for this position means they don't have a lot of capacity to invest in this. So they're already doing double the work, and hiring truly is almost a full-time job. And so you're like, hey, we know you're doing double the work, but we need you to go hire this individual over here. We need you to do a good job. Like, there's no wonder that people start to rush this process.
Especially if they're just going to Indeed, like they're doing the whole process themselves. That's a nightmare, right? And I understand that there's costs involved with working with professionals, but um, I I I have a client right now. I love them, but they're doing this and they're dealing with literally hundreds, maybe thousands of resumes and having to fish through these. And we have a term for that in the recruiting industry. You probably use it. Spray and pray. You've got certain candidates who are literally applying to every job that they think they have a chance to, just checking the box, apply for this job, apply for the, quick apply. And they really have no interest in your job. They just want a job, right? And so you have to filter through that mess of resumes. It's super painful having a a beneficial, like somebody to act as that first layer to screen out the spray and pray and find the people that actually appear to want the job and are actually a potentially good match is invaluable in terms of time. In my opinion, I've had amazing partners over the years, and wow, I never could have had the best hires that I had, and I had some amazing, amazing hires if wasn't for their help. I never would have found them. Never.
I agree, and I just shot a video on this week of like, how many times have you gone out, posted a job on Indeed, LinkedIn, something like that? You get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes, and the reality is like maybe 10%, more than likely 5%, and sometimes 2% are the ones that are even qualified, like are even worth a screening call. Um, and I get poo pooed on this all the time. But this has held true throughout my career. And so I'll say it here again, which is the best hires that I've ever made were already employed. And like, I get it. There are things out there that are happening. There's layoffs. And like, I'm sympathetic to that. And there's a lot of reasons that somebody may be between jobs. I understand that. But I will tell you, active outreach, proactive recruiting for passive candidates has been a key to our success, both at Hunt to Killer, and it's a method that we pull. Like, we don't go out and post on Indeed and LinkedIn. Like, we have software, we put in requirements, we get 1,000 names, we go through ourselves and figure out who would be good, and we pick up the phone and we start trying to convince these people that there's a better opportunity at a different organization. Because rock star companies don't want to lose rock stars. Like, they're compensated well and they're still in their role. So anyhow, long way. We can get off this subject and move to something more fun. But I agree with you here.
I agree that it's fun, but yes, let's move on to something else.
So you talked about this agency. I feel like we're going to go all the way back now. We only have like 20 minutes, but so you started an agency. What's your story? How did you come into this thing? Discover EOS, all the things.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's a long and fascinating journey. So wow, should I go back that far? I was in college in the late 90s and the internet was still new, and I was an English major and I discovered the internet. I was like, holy crap. And I went to another college. I usually don't tell this, but it's kind of fun. I went to another I formed up an email list of college students. This is when the internet was like a green and black screen, and I started sending this email to folks, music reviews, humor, sports scores, that kind of stuff that college students would like. I started sending it to my friends. People didn't have email addresses. A lot of people didn't have email addresses back then in the late 90s. And so I started sending it. People started sending me other people's email addresses to join the list. And so I said, okay, great. This is fun. And so before you know it, I've got 200 or 300 people on this list. I put this thing out once a week and it's fun, right? So I go to another college, and I was there for a beer golf weekend, right? So 9 houses, 9 kegs of beer, and I'm talking to a cute girl at the second hole, and I said, "Hey, do you have an email address?" And she said, "Oh my God, I love email." Now it tells you something about the '90s that you say, "Do you have an email address?" And I said, "No." I said, "Really? That's awesome," because most people at that time still didn't, or they were just getting into it. And she said, "Oh my God, I get this email newsletter every week. It's amazing. I print it out on the dot matrix printer, and I hang it from my dorm room door." And I said, really? And I said, what's the name of the newsletter? And it was my newsletter. And people are like, this is the guy. He's the guy that does the newsletter. And like, oh my God. I was like a celebrity. And I was like, oh my God, like the internet can connect people that I have never even met. So I took the rest of my credits. I spent on computer science. I spent a couple of years doing freelance web development, landed a job at QVC as a web developer, got promoted to lead that team 2 years later, got promoted to lead the business side. So deciding how to sell the most Diamonique Pilates machines and candy apples day in and day out at QVC on the web. By the time I left in 2007, it was the third largest e-commerce site in the United States after Dell and Amazon. Believe it or not, it was $1 billion e-commerce site in 2007. Went to Accenture where I did early digital marketing stuff for Cargill, United Airlines, Best Buy, and Lowe's. Then the CMO at QVC went over to Aflac. He said, come on over. I want you to join the team. So I led digital marketing at Aflac. Started with a tiny budget, tiny team. By the time I left, about 4 years later, it was a $10 million a year budget and a team of 17 people. Did everything in digital there, won a bunch of awards. It was unbelievable. It was an incredible journey. And then after that, I had a personal issue that I had to sort out. I returned to Pennsylvania, and then I family issue that, and then I returned to Pennsylvania, joined Ronstadt, and led their digital marketing team in the United States for about 3 years. Um, Incredible corporate journey. Loved working with people, even the folks that weren't great. There was a small handful of them, but most of them were amazing. Loved working with those people. Loved launching people's careers. Loved giving autonomy. Loved teaching people. Didn't so much love the big bureaucracy that you see in those organizations. So I said, I'm going to be a smart guy and I'm going to open an agency and work with companies that are smaller and more nimble and more entrepreneurial in nature, and they won't have those kinds of problems. Well, you can imagine what happened next. They had exactly the same problems, or they had actually worse problems. But what was really, frankly, painful for me is that I started having problems in my own organization about a year and a half in. And that was painful because I had been a really capable fixer in my old life. I think if you talk to anybody that worked with me, I was like one of those Mr. White types that, if the project is blown up or is blowing up or the team can't get along, or what I was really a specialist at was like impossible deadlines, right? Like Ronstadt said, okay, we want to do a full rebrand of Ronstadt in the United States in 72 days. And people were like, that's not possible. And I said, that is possible. I've done this before. I'll do it. And I did it. And people were like shocked, right? And amazed. It was great. Amazing team. I had an amazing team. I didn't do it all myself. I wasn't coding web pages, but you get the drift. I was great at solving other people's problems in somebody else's framework. I was not able to be objective with my own problems, and I had no framework of my own. I mean, I had used the ADM, the Accenture Development Methodology, in the past, but it was too big and too unwieldy for my own business. So I was bitching and moaning about my business to somebody, and they said, "Oh, you should check out EOS and Traction." And I said, "That's a great idea." And then I, of course, ignored them. And then 3 weeks later, I ran into somebody else, completely different person, didn't know the first person, and I was bitching and moaning about my business some more, and they said, oh, you should check out EOS and Traction. And I said, yeah, you know what, maybe there's something here. So I checked out EOS and Traction, and given my strategic background, because I did a lot of strategy work over that corporate portion of my career, I love the elegance of it and the simplicity, and it took like big strategic planning and just like boiled it down and locked it all together with all these other elements that fit like perfectly. I was like, I'm doing this. So I did it. I put it in place in my business. It was great. I got my personal life over the next 3 years. I tripled my revenues, got my personal life back. And in that period, I had like sort of a midlife crisis. So I guess not a crisis because there's no sports car involved. And, I didn't like get a tattoo. But what I did have was an epiphany, which is when I look back at my career and everybody I touched. I'm really proud of the fact that I've launched some amazing people into amazing careers by giving them autonomy and ability and really all the rope they need and all the guidance they need to be successful. And they have taken off. They've done amazing things. I'm really, really proud of that. And so I saw in EOS an ability to do that day in and day out with my clients, and I freaking love it. It satisfies my craving for helping, people. It satisfies my craving for variety. It is never the same thing twice. And it satisfies my craving for winning because I love to freaking win. And I love seeing my clients win, right? Last week, I had a client come into the third quarterly. Hey, we already hit our annual goal. And I'm like, yeah, we're winning. We're winning together. And they're so happy. And I'm so happy too. So that's what brought me here today. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you. I'm a true believer. Also got two kids, 12 and 16, married 21 years, and I have been known to karaoke. So take that for what it is. That's pretty much me in a nutshell. That's my
What's your
story.
go-to song?
Uh, I've got friends in low places because, I'm disappointed with what's been happening with Garth. I have no idea what that really is. But what I can tell you is that when you get to that at the Oasis part, like the crowd just goes, and it's such a great warm up, and everybody knows it. Everybody has fun with it. It's a great group crowd song that everybody gets into.
Got it. So I love it. What you were talking about, you said a year in, did I hear this correctly? A year in and you guys hit a ceiling?
It was between a year and a half and 2 years. It was about 18, 20 months was when that was going on because I was doing very well financially. I had lots of clients, um, plenty of work, but like my processes were weak at best, which was really painful because I'd always been a good process wonk in my prior years. And my people were not in good shape either. It was almost like I had like it felt like I'd forgotten everything I learned. That I'd been working in 15 years in corporate, and I was like, I just couldn't execute on that anymore. It was really strange and not pleasant.
What do you think the reason for that? Like when you talk about your people, I guess let's start with this. Did you have the wrong people inside of the organization, or have you burnt your people out and weren't properly leading, managing, and or maybe a little bit of both?
I think the latter. I think as an owner leader in an entrepreneurial organization, it's awfully tempting to start trimming those corners, right? Like we talked about before, do I really need to talk about Bob right now? I've got 5,000 things I've got to get done. Do I really need to have this corrective conversation? I've got these things again. Do I really need to do this? And it got to the point where I was spread so thin because I was doing so much, and I was really, sitting in multiple seats at the time. The best framework to talk about it is the tyranny of the urgent, right? You're probably familiar with this, like the tyranny of the urgent versus the important, right? So the tyranny of the urgent was on my back, and I was doing everything just to keep things running, just to keep things going, to get it done, to keep the clients happy, to keep the revenue flowing in, and the important stuff, right? Keeping my employees happy, having clarity on the vision, being able to communicate with them and with my providers, my external providers, as well as my clients in a clear way and focused way about where we were going and how we were going to get there, fell by the wayside, right? So it was me. The problem was me, and I can say that now because I'm over it.
And what was the so when you look at that time and you would hit the glass ceiling and the organization is kind of stuck, like what was the biggest unlock? So you bring in EOS, you implement EOS, like what were those pieces that started to fall into place where you saw things start to kind of break out, bust loose, and you were off to the races?
Rocks is the shortest answer, right? Because I think I am naturally wired, and I know this about myself, to want to do everything all the time, right? I am a visionary, is the terminology we use in EOS, which is I am easily distracted. I'm just going to be completely honest. I got sidetracked on something right before I jumped on with you today, and I had this moment, and I do this to myself now. I said out loud, "What are you doing, James? Don't do that. You got to get on with Ryan." That was dominating my business. I was chasing everything all the time. And the discipline of going through and saying out loud, these are the 3 to 7 things that matter most to the organization and that matter most to each person on the leadership team. And then drilling that in, like, I still look at my rocks every single day. It's at the top of my to-do list. I have a little box, and it's visible every time. I do it on my iPad. I do it on my iPad now. But there's a little box on the upper right that says rocks, and it's got my revenue number, it's got my profit number, it's got my measurables, and it's got my rocks, right? And I that if I didn't have that anchoring me every day, I would be tempted to be doing more of the stuff, more of the distractions. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm perfection, right? I do get distracted, but having that anchor for me was huge. It changed the game for me because it forced me to make decisions about what was important and what wasn't important. And it still affects me to this day. It still helps me. Like I am right now I'm in the process of establishing my rocks for next quarter. I'm meeting with my T group, which is an internal EOS group of people. They're basically a peer advisory group that I work with, and we're going to do our quarterly um, in the next couple of weeks. And so I'm working on my rocks right now, and it actually feels good. And you know what? I'm going to tell you, I only got like a 60% on my rocks last quarter, and I know why. I've diagnosed it. I've looked back, and I feel good about where I'm going now, and that helps. That's good.
What you just said there. So I've been having similar problems. You talked. What was the word you used to get? It was like impact versus. What
Oh,
was?
it's the tyranny of the urgent, right? It's the tyranny of the urgent, right? That's when urgent issues are, and if you look it up, right, this is not a new thing. I didn't make this up. And it's not part of EOS, but I've been aware of it for a long time because I've lived under it, which is like in any organization, it's the stuff that needs to get done right now. But what tends to happen is the important stuff, which is like the rocks, tend to get pushed aside. And if you don't have the discipline to say the important stuff will also get done, and in many cases, push the tyranny of the urgent stuff aside or figure out how to reduce the tyranny of the urgent, delegating things, getting systems, tech processes, whatever in place to reduce those urgent things so that you can work on the important things, you're going to be caught in this hamster wheel forever.
Yeah, and I almost took us down that path because I've been struggling with it so much. But you just said something, and like I'm going to do this as soon as we finish here, which is you make your rocks visible every day. Like I look at my rocks every single week. So during the L10 meeting, we go through and where am I at? And I won't say I forget about them, but I'm not thinking about them. And to put that at the top of somewhere, someplace that you're looking at every day, I love that idea, and I'm gonna steal that from you.
Well, Ryan, how are you doing with your rocks? I'm going to ask you a question.
So here's something that's interesting. This is actually the path. Now that you just brought this up, this is the path I wanted to take us down. Because not well. And what I've been debating is this because we all did pretty well with our rocks at Hunt a Killer, but we were an organization of at that point over 100 people. We had 7 SLT members. We had 6 years of proven performance, and so like we understood basically where the organization was going. And what I have found here, Alana does amazing, by the way. Like every single quarter she's killing her rocks, and every single quarter I'm coming up short. And it's because things change, and I'm trying to figure out like one of the things that we say in EOS is like, okay, well, you're not a very good leader, a very good boss, a very good manager if you can't get an understanding of the core things that need to be accomplished that will drive the organization towards whatever those goals are. And the argument that I would make for that is like in your first year, in your first 18 months, like new data is coming so quickly that like I keep like it's not that we're not accomplishing. We're accomplishing a bunch of stuff, but the rocks keep shifting. So anyhow, I'm not doing well in rocks this quarter at all. And I actually wanted to ask you that, which is like a a, a more immature organization, I won't say is it acceptable, but is it excusable to a certain degree to have rock shift within 90 days?
Have rocks shift within. So you're asking me a slightly different question than I thought was about to come out of your mouth. So I'm having to adjust.
What questions do you think I would come
Are
out?
you saying literally having rocks shift? Like you want to go in and you want to reauthor your rocks? Like you realize 3 weeks after you set them, you know what? This isn't what I think I should do. I should do something else. Is that what you're asking me?
It's either that or there's no way it can get accomplished. I'll give you an example. An example right now is we had this idea to put together a community, and so the whole concept was put together a community, find some partners, go do it. Have had a couple meetings with people around it. People are excited about it, but there's no way it's getting done this quarter. I know I could do it this quarter, but it's not something that I want to take on solo, and therefore, like it's going to take more time to get the people that need to be on board. We had a rock or a long-term issue that was create, develop, and launch our partner program. That's high impact. That's something I can get done solo and something I can get done. And so like I have a rock now that's off track and I'm working on something that's on the long-term issues because I know I can actually get this done. This is still moving, but I can't control why it's not moving as fast.
Yeah. So I think if I were to IDS this issue, I think the underlying the big I, right? Because I'm sure that you're aware that like the most important part of IDS is like really to drill into what the underlying issue is. Now, when I hear this, I think, well, the underlying issue is probably in how you're setting your rocks, that you may either not be setting the rocks the right way. You may be too ambitious about what you think you can accomplish in 90 days. You may not be setting clear rocks for yourself that are smart. I think you probably are setting smart based on what you just said, but you may be setting something that's too big or that for whatever reason, you haven't really done the thought and the analysis. I would challenge you to really think about and analyze the rocks, not only in the session room but ahead of the session room. Like what I recommend to my clients is like, listen, review your VTO before we get into the quarterly. Okay, like really think about what rocks are important. What are the biggest opportunities in your business? What are the biggest issues in your business? So because what maybe, and I'm diagnosing here, but what I'd like you to think about is, okay, well, why did that rock change? Like, what about it? Like, go all the way back to the moment that that rock came into your mind. What's actually changed? Is it that data has changed, or the way you want to market yourself has changed, or the way you want to market the community, or the cost of the community, and really diagnose why that rock is a dead rock. Now, I think it's okay for you to walk away and say, I'm not going to finish that rock. Like, you shouldn't feel bad about that because our whole purpose at EOS is for you to say at the end of the quarter, I didn't get that rock done. Why didn't I get it done? And for you to have that reflection and that moment where you say, well, I didn't get it done because, and to really be open and honest, like, okay, what changed, right? Was it the marketing? Like I said before, was it the marketing side? Was it the execution? Was it the cost? Was it the resources? Why didn't you get that rock done? Because that quarterly, you've probably heard this before because you've had a bunch of implementers on, but that quarterly is your opportunity to look back at the quarter and learn from it, right? And then use that insight to assess what you're about to do, which is review your VTO, make sure you're on the right track, and make adjustments if you're not, and then plan, right? So our goal is not for there to be perfection right out of the gate. So don't beat yourself up. Our goal is to help you become a better predictor about what's coming ahead so that you learn based on that one rock about that community, why that rock failed, so that when you set your next rock, you can set it better, right? This is like, it's more like physical fitness, right? We're working out, right? You're building a muscle. Like we literally within EOS, I hope I'm not giving anything away here. I don't think I am, but in EOS, we talk about doing our work with our clients as doing the reps, right? We're building our own mastery muscle for ourselves so that we can be stronger in how we serve our client community. And just like that, our clients are doing reps in their L10 meetings. You're doing reps when you're reflecting and you're taking clarity breaks on why the rocks didn't happen and why they did happen. Where were you successful? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So I think take pride in the fact that you're not wasting your time on a rock that doesn't matter, and reflect on it and figure out why it doesn't matter anymore. And you'll set better rocks next time.
That's that's awesome. I like as you were talking through that stuff. One of the things is doing the diligence up front, starting to think about these things before you come into the room. We did that at Hunt to Killer. We haven't done that too much here, and so I think that's a big thing. And then also as a part of that brainstorming session, not just like what can we actually accomplish in this quarter, but also maybe some of the controllable and uncontrollables. So it's like if I would have done an analysis on this, say like I can't do this on my own, but I can't control, how quick other people are going to move, then maybe the rock should be smaller of like, we've initiated something and we're on the right path, breaking it down into like 3 phases or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean that's super common. Like I have clients that at the very beginning they set these rocks, and sometimes I try to be really careful about my guidance here because part of this is we want them to learn this on their own, and if I guide them too much, that and I'm being too heavy-handed, then they're not learning on their own. They're relying on me, and we want to foster independence, right? So, but when I do see clients at the very beginning of EOS that set great big rocks, right? And I would consider it a great big rock to set up a online community for a group of people in 3 months, right? Even though there's turnkey solutions out there, I've actually done this work for big organizations. It doesn't, in my experience, 3 months is super, super, super ambitious. So what we do is we say, okay, well, what can we get done in 3 months? and say, okay, well, maybe it's a vendor assessment. It's reaching out to the stakeholders and saying, is this something that we would actually be interested in? Figuring out what the return on the investment might be, figuring out what the staffing needs are going to be, and like basically coming up with a really detailed plan. That's something you can get done in 90 days for sure, and then make a decision, a really clear decision, if you want to even chunk up the build out of the community over time as well, right? Like who's going to moderate it, that type of stuff. Like answering all those questions and implementing and rolling it out in 90 days is super tough, right? Like at least from where I stand with a little bit of experience in it. So
Love it. All right, James, you've given us some incredible wisdom. If someone's been listening to this and they're like, I need James in my life. I need James to become our implementer. What are you looking for in a client? Where can they find you? And let's let them know how to get a hold of you.
I work in the Mid Atlantic, Ryan, which is basically Philly through DC. That's where my clients mostly are, but I also have clients across the United States. Got one in Chicago, one in beautiful Tennessee. So I do virtual, not my preference, face to face, hybrid, and virtual. I've got my own beautiful session space in southeastern Pennsylvania, right near the Brandywine battlefield. It's unbelievably beautiful out there. I love it. My clients love it. I had a client that actually caught some fish. There's a pond on the property while we were taking breaks in one of the sessions. I loved it. The IT guy. What am I looking for in a client? I'm looking for folks that are ready for change, that are really at the point where they are saying, you know what? I am a great purveyor at what I do, and I recognize that EOS is a widely recognized, respected, and frankly widely adopted. Over, we believe at this point, there's over 300,000 organizations using EOS tools worldwide right now. I think we're in 30 countries. Don't quote me on that. It works, but you have to be committed to the process, right? So that commitment matters, and that's what I'm really looking for. Like I think looky-loos, people looking for a seminar to make their staff feel good aren't a great match. But people that are like, you know what, we really want to embrace this and we want to embrace change. I love that. I love to see people go through that journey together, and I love to be their guide, their Sherpa on that journey as well. So those are the types of folks I'm looking for in really any industry. Although, as you know, I'm pretty deep in marketing. I'm pretty deep in recruiting, and I'm pretty deep in data. I was inventing data platforms back in the 2000s, in the early days before those things even existed. So I bring that to the table in terms of folks saying, well, you know what kind of leading metrics should we have? I'm like, well, let's look at your funnel, and we can go through this and figure out which ones are important to you. So I'm fantastic. I'm told I'm fantastic at at doing scorecards for people because I've done a lot of that over the years. So yeah, does that answer your question? Did I miss anything?
It does. James, I've known you for 2 hours, and you are fantastic. So this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on. And yeah, if nothing else, like you and I will definitely be staying in touch after this. But thanks for coming on, James. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ryan. You have a great day. Thanks for having me.